Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, higher interest rates are on the way. Hike in 28 years to try to bring down inflation.
We at the Fed understand the hardship that high inflation is causing.
We'll look at the impact higher rates will have on consumer pocketbooks and the political battle over inflation in Washington. The new president of the Southern Baptist Convention talks about taking on sexual abuse in the church.
Sexual predators have used our decentralized polity to try to turn our churches into a hunting ground.
How his optimism could help unify the Baptists during a difficult time. How did education in America change so much to what we have today, with drag queens for children and more?
It happened gradually, and then it happened suddenly, as Hemingway would put it. It was a shift from seeking truth through God to seeking truth or validation to government.
Fox News' Pete Hegseth and a Christian educator, David Goodwin, talk about the battle for the American mind in our educational system. And she was former President Donald Trump's campaign manager in 2016. Kellyanne Conway talks to CBN News about life in the White House and more.
God had his hand in guiding everything, and God had a plan for me from the beginning. So even when it looked like the road was bumpy or blockaded, that he had a plan for me.
And she talks about the stress on her family and whether she thinks the 2020 presidential election was stolen. All those stories and more today on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin with the #1 political issue in our country today, inflation, hitting virtually everyone's wallet. Now, something else is going up too, interest rates, including rates on everything from credit cards, mortgages, car loans, and more. And inflation is a hot topic in Washington as well, with Republicans and even Democratic economists saying the Democrats' big spending last year added to inflation, while the president is going after the oil companies. CBN's Wendy Griffith brings us the story.
Chairman Jerome Powell announced an interest rate increase of 0.75 points, the biggest in nearly 3 decades.
We at the Fed understand the hardship that high inflation is causing.
The board pursuing a series of rate hikes to bring down record high inflation. However, those moves delivering another blow to consumers as it raises the cost of borrowing. Credit cards' average APR is up over 20% for the first time. Mortgage loans were around 3% at the beginning of the year, now above 6%, pushing monthly payments hundreds of dollars higher. But the #1 issue for most Americans remains the ever-increasing prices at the pump.
Everything is going up except our paychecks, and this is not right.
President Biden blaming the war in Russia and oil companies for high gas prices. He sent a letter to 7 oil executives threatening to invoke emergency powers if they don't increase production. His press secretary called on them to be patriotic.
We are calling on them to do the right thing, to be patriots here, and not to use the war as an excuse or as a reason to not put out a production.
But Republicans say Biden has done everything he can to limit oil production in pursuit of his agenda to convert America to green energy.
The president's executive orders have shut down the Extel pipeline. They have stopped the issuance of more leases. They've stopped the progress on the permitting of those leases, stopped the offshore oil production. The fact is we were energy independent.
Over the medium term, the critical thing is that we become more dependent on the wind and the sun that are not subject to geopolitical influences.
The Fed is expected to raise rates again in July, causing concern of tipping the economy into recession. While economists say a recession is not for certain, many believe it's becoming more likely. Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
The number of abortions is on the rise in America. The latest data shows they increased from 2017 to 2020 after a decade of decline. After a decline that lasted for years. According to the Guttmacher Institute, formerly the research arm of Planned Parenthood, there were 930,000 abortions in 2020, 1 in every 5 pregnancies ending in abortion that year. That was up from 862,000 in 2017, which was the lowest number since 1973. That is the same year the Supreme Court legalized abortion nationwide. The High Court appears to be ready to overturn that decision in the coming days. As the country awaits the court's verdict, growing threats to pro-life supporters. Just the words "Jane's Revenge" have been found at the site of the attack on a crisis pregnancy center as well as other pro-life groups. Wednesday, a statement released under that name warns there's more to come. The statement said, "We are not one group, but many," and claim responsibility for attacks in more than a dozen cities. It goes on to say, "From here forward, any anti-choice group who closes their doors and stops operating will no longer be a target. But until you do, it's open season and we know where your operations are." The Biden administration, which had been silent about the attacks, condemned the threat Wednesday. A White House assistant press secretary told the Daily Wire violence and destruction of property have no place in our country under any circumstances. And the president denounces this. Crisis pregnancy centers in Wisconsin, Oregon, and New York have been firebombed. Churches and other pro-life groups have been the target of graffiti and vandalism. 122 Republican House members sent a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland calling for an investigation into these attacks. As the Southern Baptist Convention is dealing with sexual abuse in its churches at its annual meeting, its new president is blazing a different trail. As a small church pastor, social media pro, and leader at an historic moment for the convention. Heather Sells reports now from Anaheim, California, on Pastor Bart Barber and his vision for his flock.
Barber did not mince words, calling predators wolves who are going after sheep in Southern Baptist churches.
Sexual predators have used our decentralized polity to try to turn our churches into a hunting ground.
And now Southern Baptists have signaled they're ready for reform.
It's time for Southern Baptists to realize how nimble and resilient our Baptist polity can be to put sexual predators on notice that Southern Baptist churches are a dangerous place for them.
At his first press conference, Barber cast a vision for taking on the predators while candidly acknowledging another denominational hazard: infighting.
Every way that I've served Southern Baptists has left scars. Every way that I've done it. Hey, good morning, everybody. Bart Barber.
Still, Barber is known for his relentless optimism that translates in person and online.
He's positive. He's encouraging. Bart just pulls out his phone and does videos every day. I think you're seeing a shift culturally in the convention and culture where people are, some people even say more of a mini church movement, intimacy, things like that. And so I think that Bart resonates with a lot of this new generation of Southern Baptists.
Shooting back to try to own them does not solve the problem.
In a country worn down from a pandemic, politics, and mass shootings, he's adamant that there's never been a better time to share the gospel.
Barber's first priority is naming a new abuse task force. He's vowed to work quickly to build a diverse group that will recommend new reforms that Southern Baptists can consider. Reporting in Anaheim, Heather Sells, CBN News.
Coming up, how did schools in America change so much? Children are now exposed to drag queens and more. We'll get some answers from Fox News' Pete Hegseth and a Christian educator, David Goodwin, when we come back.
Before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Watch Dan and Dale tackle trending topics that test your faith on the next Faith Wire. Monday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel. The Global Lane takes you around the world, providing facts over fiction.
What might rising trade and geopolitical tensions mean for you on the home front?
With over 45 years of experience, award-winning journalist Gary Lane brings you the truth from a global angle.
What about the issue of immigration?
World news analysis you won't see anywhere else.
And it's all right here on the Global Lane.
Thursday night at 8:30 on the CBN News Channel.
New York City taxpayers recently learned that education administrators spent $200,000 to support drag queen shows in their public schools and libraries. Parents in the Big Apple are shocked, but two guests on this week's edition of The Global Lane are not surprised. Fox and Friends weekend co-host Pete Hegseth and Christian educator David Goodwin are co-authors of the new book, Battle for the American Mind, Uprooting a Century of Miseducation. And they explain the progressive takeover of American public schools didn't happen quickly.
It happened gradually, and then it happened suddenly, as Hemingway would put it. And when David and I both approached this topic, our assumption was maybe it was a product of the 60s at first, and it quickly became clear that this was even before the Frankfurt School, when the Marxists showed up with critical theory. John Dewey and early progressives in the early 20th century made school their intentional target because they understood the affections, the education of our youngest minds were the most important if they were going to change the social fabric, the social construct of America, which was their goal from the beginning. These were all atheists. These were all socialists, or almost all of them were. And their goal was social change. And they knew the schoolroom was the place they could do it. And it started with the removal of God. It happened over 100 years ago, which is why, as you pointed out, neither David nor I are surprised when you see the kind of lunacy we see today.
And David, tell us more. I know it wasn't just with the schools. What effect did the Supreme Court under Chief Justice Earl Warren have on public education in America?
Well, that was the capstone of the progressive model and the progressive intent. They had the courts under their control by the early 1960s, and through a series of Supreme Court cases, they gradually took prayer out of school. They then took the Bible out of school, and they then forbid really any teaching of Christian instruction in school. But that was the kind of the capstone of a long effort. It wasn't the beginning, it was really the end. The beginning was in about 1915 or thereabouts, when they set out intentionally with the Gary Plan and with several other initiatives to sideline Christianity. And then obviously once they had orphaned it, they could push it to the side, and they had full control of the classroom at that point.
Pete, you suggested that starting in the 1920s, classical Christian education was replaced with nationalism, the pledge, country, all have merit, but they have weaknesses because God is taken out of the classroom. And today it's progressed to the pledge without God, government instead of country, equity instead of equality, vocational training over reasoning, values instead of virtue, morality without Judeo-Christian religious faith. Explain a little more for us.
Well said by you. Ultimately, it was a shift from seeking truth through God to seeking truth or validation to government. It's not the ideas of good and healthy patriotism or fidelity to your country or appreciation for the founding in 1776 and those ideas. It was allegiance to the state. And you mentioned the Pledge of Allegiance. We look at our Pledge of Allegiance, at least we do as conservatives and patriots, and say, hey, that's a great thing, under God. Well, the original pledge was written in the late 19th century by a socialist who ultimately wrote it without under God, because the pledge was meant to shift kids away comfortably from God at the center of the classroom, the cross at the center, to the flag at the center of the classroom, which was an easier sell to parents at the time. And now, of course, fast forward to today, and they're happy to get rid of the flag, kneel for the anthem, get rid of the pledge. Prayer long gone. Now patriotism is the next target as they move toward their woke social justice, frankly, culturally Marxist agenda in our classroom.
And Pete, you and I are both followers of Jesus. You talk about how this paideia means, quote, history is rejected, science is God, the state is the temple, which citizen workers worship. So as journalists, we deal every day with the political, but beyond politics here, it seems there's a well-devised strategy that is really a spiritual one. What do you think?
It was spiritual from the beginning, and I'd love to have David chime in on this as well. Paideia is an ancient Greek word that's long forgotten. It doesn't even have a direct translation in English, but it's throughout our book. In fact, David's the one that really put the meat on the bones of the Western Christian paideia. You see, we fight in terms of politics now and may win incremental battles here or there. What the left understood is they had to go at the heart of what made us who we are. What do we value? What's our vision of the good life? What do we consider our virtues? And when they targeted that, they targeted at the foundation of who we really are, really the current underneath the top waters of the stream. If culture's the top waters, the current is paideia underneath, and they targeted that.
Yes, I think if we turn to Ephesians 6, it's a great chapter that kind of encapsulates the responsibilities and the upbringing of pretty much all the classes of society at the time. But it says, fathers, raise your children and there's a whole bunch of words that are used there: education, instruction. The two that are most commonly used are fear and admonition. All of those are derived from the one word paideia. So it's a command of our Lord to raise children in the paideia of the Lord. And therefore, we ought to be looking at what that means.
What's the takeaway from this one? What do you want people to understand and do?
Take action. The time is now. First and foremost, do what's best for your kids and your grandkids by radically reorienting your life around their education.
The book is Battle for the American Mind, Uprooting a Century of Miseducation. I recommend it. I've read it. It's wonderful. Pete Hegseth, David Goodwin, thank you for sharing your time and insights. We appreciate it.
Gary, thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Also on tonight's edition of The Global Lane, you can see more of this interview, including a discussion on Christian schools and a conversation with the late President Ronald Reagan's son, Michael, about Father's Day. You can see these stories and more on The Global Lane. It begins at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time on the CBN News Channel. You can also download the CBN News app and watch it on demand. Still ahead, CBN News speaks with Kellyanne Conway, President Trump's campaign manager in the 2016 election. We're going to hear what life was like inside the White House, if she believes President Trump actually won or lost in 2020, and what she says about God having a plan for her throughout her years in the administration. We'll have all that for you right after this.
When I came to Regent University, it's like the world opened up. I felt like I needed to advance my career and go back to school. Regent was a perfect fit for me. The Regent professors are world class. You are equipped. The focus of the faculty is on each individual student, whether it's online or in person. You become a part of Regent's family. You carry with you not just the content and the knowledge, but the confidence to understand that we can be significant in the world.
Regent University. Follow your path.
Nigerian Christians in Iran are routinely arrested.
Happily, Christians continue to suffer.
In times of trial and affliction, you need to know the truth.
One of the fastest growing Christian populations in the world.
Join Wendy Griffith and George Thomas for Christian World News.
Young people are the ones who are open to the gospel.
Powerful stories of suffering and hope that affect all Christians. Saturday night at 6 on the CBN News Channel. Get Protect Your Sleep and discover how to improve the quality of your life. A free DVD or booklet from the Christian Broadcasting Network.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
5 leading experts help remove the obstacles between you and restorative sleep.
When you don't get a restful night's sleep, you wake up with an accumulation of stress.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet today.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
You'll discover how food affects your sleep, how to put insomnia to rest, explore effective remedies for sleep apnea, and much more in Protect Your Sleep. Wake up to your best life and get Protect Your Sleep today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet.
In 2016, Kellyanne Conway became the first woman to manage a successful presidential campaign. She went on to serve as one of President Donald Trump's closest advisors. Now she's written a book about that experience called Here's the Deal. She reveals how she endured attacks from members of the president's family while her own husband was plotting attacks on the administration. CBN's Jenna Browder brings us the story.
In her new book, Kellyanne Conway makes a lot of headlines. Among them, former President Trump lost the 2020 election and was ill-advised by campaign staff and election deniers surrounding him.
Who were these people? Well, lots of folks. I mean, nobody's going to get before the president without the permission of the chief of staff, for example. And I think people told Donald Trump he was going to win in the landslide, and frankly, he should have, between his policy accomplishments, his Democratic opponent. There was so much working against him, though. He couldn't do the rallies because of COVID. He couldn't campaign the way he was used to, the way people love to see him campaign and get out there and really mix it up with the folks, go where they are.
While Kellyanne left the administration in August of 2020, she says these same people are still relaying that message.
But here we are a year and a half later, and I think people are still telling the president, today's the day we're going to, I know they are, today's the day we're going to turn this in this state or that state. How is that fair to him?
It's all recorded in her new book, Here's the Deal, a 500-page memoir that reveals a lot, including her rift with the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who she describes as shrewd and calculating and full of dreams and schemes.
Well, a lot of people are thanking me for saying it because they dealt with him, and whether that's people on Capitol Hill, in the White House, in the media. Let me just say for the record, Jared Kushner is a very smart person. He's highly educated. He's a successful businessman in his own right. I don't understand why he thought he should have all this unchecked authority, or why he should be able to stuff his portfolio with any issue he had the whim of tackling.
She says she often felt shut out by him, and that it wasn't she who initially had a problem with him.
But he had a problem with me. He accused me of being a leaker, which was false. He accused me of not knowing certain things or inviting myself into meetings, which was false. He once asked me, when you go on TV and talk about veterans and opioids, you offend the people who are actually working on veterans and opioids here. And I said, well, the president said I can work on those. And he said, well, it's not good enough. And it's just things like that, a lot of asides.
Another person Kellyanne writes about, her husband, George Conway, a vocal critic of former President Trump. She writes his attacks on Twitter were sneaky and almost sinister, adding that after work, George would be just steps away in his home office, plotting against her and her boss.
That had to be tough for your marriage.
It was very tough on me, tough on our kids, tough on our loved ones. Nobody literally knew what was happening. They didn't know what to say. They never experienced anything like that. I certainly haven't.
But she says it wasn't always like that. In fact, George was once a Trump fan and even accepted a job within the administration early on.
George does not owe fealty and loyalty to Donald Trump. He did not take a vow to Donald Trump. I did not take a vow to Donald Trump. I took an oath to the Constitution. He took a vow with me to love, honor, and cherish. And I think included in that is to try to support your spouse's career.
On the topic of faith, Kellyanne writes about being raised by her mom, grandmother, and aunts, all strong Catholic Italian women in South Jersey. She says faith and family were central.
God had his hand in guiding everything, and God had a plan for me from the beginning. So even when it looked like the road was bumpy or blockaded, that he had a plan for me.
And for her critics who maybe disagree with her on the 2020 election or other issues.
And I like to tell people now, particularly my own children, but really kids on college campuses, Jenna, most of all, don't forget in this sort of woke, slanderous culture that whoever God made, no man or woman can cancel.
As for 2024 and the possibility of Donald Trump running again, Kellyanne says if asked, she would seriously consider heading up his campaign for a second time. Her first priority, though, is her family. In Washington, D.C., Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Kellyanne Conway's book is called Here's the Deal. You can find it wherever books are sold. Coming up, an Israeli company has found a way to help some food lovers with a sense of adventure to follow in the footsteps of John the Baptist. We're going to have that served when we come back. Stay with us.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
I think as a father, it's my job, to lead. Just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
If you're looking for a natural protein source, the Bible might provide some inspiration. Take John the Baptist. The New Testament preacher ate natural foods like wild honey and protein-rich locusts. Now, an Israeli-based company has cultivated that knowledge into a new product line called Biblical Protein. Sourced from the banks of the Jordan River in Israel, Biblical Protein is the first commercial locust farm in the world, offering everything from protein shakes to energy bars. The kosher-approved insects are ground into powder and added to your food for a boost of protein and essential nutrients. Well, it is time now for your Thursday Thankful, and I hope you'll join me in this prayer of gratitude. Father, thank you for even those difficult moments. I know you are with me in the tough times and in the great times of celebration. You are consistent. Now help me to be as faithful and consistent as you are, because you are my loving Father. And to that prayer, let us all simply say, Amen. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Thank you so much for watching. I want to remind you, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel at any time. You can also find them online. That is cbnnews.com. We would love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day. You can email us. The address is right there at the bottom of your screen. That is newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, as well as Instagram. We certainly would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching today. We look forward to seeing you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody, and God bless.